Videos like this are made possible by viewers like you. Ralph Smart, New Age proponent and all-round conspiracy theory pusher, can fit so many disparate paranoid conspiracy theories into just one of his normal 30-minute long videos. So much so that you can literally play a full game of conspiracy theory bingo with the mind-bending content. Think of this as the mother of all try not to get pilled challenges. Are you ready? Let's talk about this. Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Andy Fellows and I make videos on cult skepticism and making sense of life after the New Age. I talk about the wild things that New Agers believe a fair bit on this channel, so if you're interested in a skeptical approach on that, then why not subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell and hit all so that you get notified anytime I upload a video. So by my estimations, Ralph Smart is full on pilled. Like, him not wearing a mask in public is the tip of the iceberg. We'll be looking at clips from just one of his videos here today, and highlighting the worrying level of detached from reality that the contents are. So strap in and/or on, and let's get stuck into the bizarre worldview of Ralph Smart. Lucky us, right?
I told you, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm only here to tell you what you need to hear. I'm a messenger of the truth.
Okay, Daddy. So this sounds like it might be one of those classic preempting the objection moves, right? His viewers' discomfort can be explained away so that when they rightly disagree or recognize it for the toothless hogwash it is, he can be like, well, I told you that you wouldn't want to hear it. I'm the messenger of truth. So actually he's more likely to probably just say something creepy like, respect your mentors, and a little smiley face. Also, the fact that he's offering nothing to back up the claim that he's a messenger of truth. I mean, to be fair, that's sort of on brand for your run-of-the-mill New Age content creator / messiah figure. He's just making bold claims and offering nothing to back them up. And it's like he's expecting his viewers to just sort of go, yeah, I mean, that sounds true, so. It's like the same way you'd be expected to respond to a pathological liar who's got a knife to you. Like, yeah, okay, whatever you say, don't hurt me. Yeah, no, I don't need any proof. Just, we're friends, right?
There is a big awakening, a very big awakening happening on the planet. And that's why there is such a strong need to suppress information, the truth.
So whenever I'm watching Ralph Smart's videos, the fact that he doesn't edit them very much always strikes me as this sort of, he's got this deal with himself that he's not going to do that. He's just going to put these videos out and whatever he says in them is his truth, right? So he's just going to let it flow. So this moment here where he's like, there's been an awakening, and then he like pauses and he's like, in that pause, I feel like he's deciding whether he's going to lean in or whether this time is going to be the time that he breaks his rule, teetering on, am I going to commit to this or not? And there's a few moments like that where he's sort of, there's like silence while his brain works, and you can kind of see the wheel turning a little bit.
The White Coat Summit, okay? A group of doctors gathered in Washington, D.C., and they were talking about what's really going on with COVID-19. Everywhere, their videos were removed because they were saying that there's a cure for COVID-19, and that's hydroxychloroquine. And there were paid hecklers in the crowd saying, shut up, right? This is all happening because this is the Great Awakening.
So this was where, when I was watching it for the first time, my ears sort of pricked up. I was like, I've heard this kind of language before. This reminds me of QAnon. I started to think that some of the things he was saying in this clip were perhaps like dog whistles to QAnon conspiracy theories. So I'm not going to go into exactly what it is that the QAnon lot believe here. There's enough information about that already, and I've included any sources to any references I've made in this video in the description below for you, so you can check those out. But there's a few things that he said here in this clip that strike me as somewhat QAnon-y, so I'm just going to highlight those quickly before we move on. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt on these things, but there's a few things here that did stand out to me. One of them is the Great Awakening, which is a very QAnon heavy, very QAnon related phrase. They use that one a lot, although understandably, because it's quite a sort of generic phrase as well, I feel like there's going to be some crossover with conspiracy theorists in like the New Age realm there, and that might be part of the appeal for them in the QAnon thing, but it equally could be used, separate from the QAnon thing. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. Also, the suppression of information that he sort of alludes to there, the paid hecklers in the crowd, writing off criticisms as being paid off. That's very QAnon-y, but also very conspiracy theorist in general. So again, want to give him the benefit of the doubt on that, not too sure on that. What I do want to know is whether these paid hecklers have been paid by Soros personally. Again, if you're not familiar with QAnon, I'll leave a link to a good podcast in the description which covers a lot of their basic sort of beliefs and sort of goes off in all these other directions to see where the ideas of QAnon link into other areas of society right now, because that's happening and it's great. Thank you to Objectively Dan for putting me onto that podcast. Another thing that stood out to me in this clip is that Ralph is saying that the videos of the White Coat Summit and stuff were removed because they were saying that there's a cure for the virus. And according to the BBC, that is why they were removed from Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Ralph doesn't explicitly say here whether he feels that the America's frontline workers who are making these claims were right, which is exactly the kind of thing that I would expect from conspiracy theorists, given that they do, just as often as they are saying, do your own research and look this up, the truth's out there, man. They're also saying, like, I'm not making any claims, I'm just raising the question, And a lot of times when they're just raising the question, it's like they don't want to get bogged down in specifics that need to be verified. They're just saying things, man. They're just opening your mind to stuff, making you think. But still, we haven't really got to the meaty part of this video yet. Ralph Smart has always got a little bit more up his sleeve, a few more wild claims up his sleeve, or like tucked into like the hem of his vest or whatever. Never disappoints old Ralphie, old infinite Ralphers.
The truth shall prevail.
What shall prevail?
I repeat, the truth shall prevail.
Once more for the people in the back.
I repeat, the truth shall prevail. You see, you cannot hide the truth for too long. It will come out, and it's coming out. Let me tell you this, deep divers. It's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be a hyena fight, because they don't want you to wake up.
So he's talking about like a dog fight or a hyena fight, which makes me think, with what he said before, although he's not explicitly mentioning the storm, which is another QAnon thing, it seems like he's alluding to it a little bit. But again, going to give him the benefit of the doubt, just thought I'd raise that point, highlight that point here as we're moving through this. This whole idea of the storm, which he's sort of alluding to here with this hyena, this dogfight, is, the dark secrets of the dark underbelly of the world is, are going to come out, and the deep state is going to be exposed for what it is and all that kind of stuff. But because he doesn't mention it by name, I'll let this one slide as well for now, but we'll put a pin in it and come back to it maybe if he makes any more overt references to anything QAnon-y. QAnon-y.
Let me remind you, the cabal own everything in this 3D matrix. The whole entertainment industry, the whole media, they own everything.
Okay. So we've got the Great Awakening, paid hecklers, this idea that they were over the target, so it was removed because they didn't want the truth coming out. A possible reference to the storm, and now the cabal. So what do we think? So at this point, I feel like he might just be like leaving clues for QAnon, leaving breadcrumbs for the QAnon like to sort of pick up and bake here. It's hard to tell whether he's like full on into it himself, or whether he's like including this as part of his message so that he appeals to the Q lot and then sort of pulls them into his own sort of version of conspiracy theories and gets them part of his audience. I don't know. It's hard to tell, obviously. There's definitely a lot of crossover between the two worldviews. And so it wouldn't surprise me here if his tact is to sort of appeal to that crossover point and then get these new viewers in. But I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, a lot of people are saying, hey, the cure for COVID-19 is hydroxychloroquine and zinc. There is a cure for everything in nature. Hydroxychloroquine, one of the main ingredients is quinine, okay? And this actually emanates from a tree bark called cinchona, the tree bark, okay? And it has been used as an anti-malaria medication for thousands of years, okay? This is what a lot of doctors are gathering around and saying actually can help with COVID-19. Nobody has to die.
So it seems like here Ralph is directly referring to the very same doctor who's made a number of troubling claims recently. One of which was that Facebook would be taken down in Jesus' name if they didn't put a Facebook page back up, which is my favourite kind of glorious, I'll be honest. I love the confidence there, you know? Now, admittedly, I don't know half as much about all this hydroxy stuff as Ralph seems to think he does, but I do know someone who does, and I've asked her to help me out on this. In a second, you're going to hear from Navadia, our anti-bullshit science megabrain in the land down under. Navadia is going to rinse through the claims in the previous clip that I just showed you and also in the next one, and she's going to KO Ralph Smart with facts in a way that I could only dream of, so buckle up.
Hey Andy, I normally would show my face, but currently I kind of look like a slug coming down from an acid trip, landing face first in a blob of salt.
The cure for COVID-19 is hydroxychloroquine.
Well, a lot of people are saying that, but they're wrong. Hydroxychloroquine does not work for COVID-19. The Lancet, which is a highly respected journal, published an article about hydroxychloroquine being a promising drug for treating COVID-19. However, immediately after it was published, the scientific community started raising concerns over the paper. Ultimately, The Lancet withdrew it.
One of the main ingredients is quinine.
Quinine, or quinine, depending on what you want to call it, is used to prevent or treat malaria. Malaria is a type of single-cell protozoa which has a complicated life cycle. It starts off as a sporozoite, it infects liver cells, which then develop into mature liver schizoids and burst from the liver cells as merozoite. It then infects red blood cells and then develops into the gametocytes, which is the adult form of the parasite. It then gets sucked up by mosquitoes, where they then sexually reproduce in the gut of the mosquito, and the circle of life continues. COVID-19 is a virus. It injects its RNA into a cell where it hijacks the cell's machinery to make more viruses. That's like trying to cure a virus by making someone take antidepressants. It doesn't work.
A lot of doctors are gathering around and saying,
No, that's not true. A lot of doctors aren't doing that. They're saying you shouldn't take hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 because the evidence suggests that it doesn't work or is in fact potentially deadly for people.
there is a cure for everything in nature.
No there isn't. If there was, the average life expectancy would be immortal. This is a logical fallacy called the appeal to nature. While, yes, a lot of our medicine does come from natural resources like aspirin from willow bark and quinine from the bark of the cinchona tree, nature has also produced toxins like botulinum which can kill people at 1 to 3 nanograms per kilogram of the human body mass. Yes, it is used in some medical settings such as Botox and hyperhidrosis treatment, but you still have to remember that botulism toxin comes from nature and is the most deadly toxin known to science. However, as a rule, synthetically produced compounds work significantly better than naturally derived compounds when it comes to medicine. I just want to make a note that the dose makes the poison, so at smaller doses some toxins can actually be medically advantageous, as such with botulinum toxin. However, apparently anti-vaxxers don't think that.
There is no profit from the cure.
Actually, there is. A sick or disabled person tends to be a greater financial strain on world economies. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting Australia, mental health costs the Australian economy $60 billion with a year. That's with a B. And that's just mental health. To treat and cure illnesses will impact economies worldwide. In fact, one of the biggest winners of selling a cure to cancer patients are people offering natural cures for their disease. These cures cost thousands of dollars that aren't usually covered by insurance or public health programs, mainly because they don't work. The person spends a lot of their time and money on unscientific cures, and then they eventually succumb to their disease, leaving behind a grieving family with large debts.
The mandatory vaccination.
Vaccinations are used as a preventative. That is why vaccines are so important. They save money by preventing people from needing a cure. Economically speaking, vaccines yield an extremely high return on investment for countries. In a SciTech Daily article, the return on investment for vaccine programs on low and middle income countries is 26, which means for every dollar spent on the vaccine program in these countries, they get a whopping $26 back. If a company wanted to make money on a drug, it wouldn't be vaccines. It would be the cure for the disease the vaccine prevents, because that's significantly more expensive for the person. If it is a life-threatening disease, then the drug would be more profitable because people would have to buy the drug.
Can we have a round of applause for that? You just drop some clap emojis in the comments with some support for Navadia's intensely brilliant science-based debunking there, please. Also, Navadia wrote a full debunking of this, which you just heard sort of the abridged version of, and I've put the full version written up on my site, which I've linked in the description below with the transcript of this episode. So if you want to check that out after this video or later or whatever, then you can see like a full debunking on everything. For now, let's carry on with Ralph's wild claims.
I will tell you, this is a conformity experiment, an obedience experiment.
So we've heard some anti-vax rhetoric previously, which gets its start from this sort of baseless, paranoid, the system thing, right? But what really bothers me is why he seems to be speaking like he knows more than anybody else. Like, how does he know this stuff? Where's he got this information from? What are his sources here? And why isn't he citing his sources? And he's going like, I will tell you. Like, he's privy to some knowledge that you're not privy to. Like, he's got access to a secret that he's letting you in on personally. So I'm calling this. This is Teal Swan level inside out nonsense with that touch of like, I know something you don't know that you always get from Teal. This is, and this whole thing about this being a conformity experiment just strikes me as a disregard for reality. This entire line as well is predicated on the virus not being the threat that it is, which, as you just heard, Navadia has pretty cleanly debunked him on. So it just doesn't stand up.
I recently went to the supermarket and I left my mask at home. And everyone there had a mask on, okay? I felt like the odd one out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel naked right now. I should have a mask on, deep divers, right? And this is how the cabal control reality. They play the game of the odd one out. And I'm here to remind you, deep divers, like I always say, let love guide you, not fear. Let me tell you this, deep divers, you have to be brave. I repeat, you have to be brave.
I mean, this is just disgusting. How hard is it to wear a mask? Okay, so anyone who knows me personally or like follows my Twitter or whatever will know that I recently have semi-regularly just sort of had brief outbursts about how enraged it makes me when people can't do the very simple things that need to be done right now to keep people safe. This is my thing at the moment. It just bothers me that people are more interested in other things than they are in human life. Like, on one level, you've got people who are just like, oh, the economy, we can't sacrifice the economy. And it's like, why are we living to serve the economy? I thought the economy was supposed to make our quality of life better. If the economy is putting our lives at risk, fuck the economy. And then you've got people like this, like Ralph Smart here, stirring the pot and just boldly stating these conspiracy theories that he has no proof of. Like, he has got no proof for this. He's just saying it. It's just nonsense, right? And so we can show that we can demonstrate that wearing a mask reduces the risk of spread of this virus, right? And he is insinuating that it's a good idea here to not wear a mask. Conspiracy theorists with no evidence to support the claims that they're making, no proof for this nonsense, right? Who aren't wearing masks when they could be, putting people at a higher risk for this thing that we do have evidence exists, that we do have evidence kills. It just annoys me. One of the most annoying things for me is when people do things that are like incoherent, that do things that don't line up with reality in a very sensible way. I used to do it a lot, and when I look back at that, it makes me cringe, right? And this, going out without a mask on, acting like the virus doesn't exist, acting like things should be going back to normal now or whatever, any of these kinds of, it just takes the cake for me. Also, I don't know if he is in England, but if he is, the current law in England right now, going by the UK Gov website, states that he should be wearing a mask if he's going into a shop. So bear in mind that this video was uploaded also on the 31st of July. Sort it out, Ralph, mate. Irresponsible. So he's not saying here that his viewers shouldn't wear a mask. He seems to be being quite careful about explicitly stating that. But if he's not insinuating it, I don't know what he's doing. Especially when he brings up this whole love and fear thing. Like, why bring up love and fear and his actions at the same time if he's not insinuating that the actions that he took were out of love? And then he's saying, like, choose love over fear, right? He's not explicitly saying it, but he's certainly implying it. I would say that, considering that he seems to refer to himself as a mentor and he's positioning himself somewhat as someone who knows things here, as a leader in some way, him positioning himself in that way and seeming to set the example of someone who is not wearing a mask. Anyone that's following him who's from the UK or living in the UK, living in England specifically, he's essentially setting an example for them to flaunt the UK law. It's not a good look, Ralph. That's really not a good look. Please no. And the love and fear thing is so easy to turn around on itself as well. Like, I think Ralph's got it inside out here, honestly. Let's turn this love and fear thing around here. If you love your life and you love the people that you care about, wear a fucking mask. How hard is that? So here's my problem with conspiracy theories in general, New Age conspiracy theories, QAnon conspiracy theories, just conspiracy theories overall, right? They seem to operate on these two basic assumptions. One, what if everything that happens is part of some nefarious plan? And two, what if this thing that I've just made up in my head is true? And then they just say the thing they've just made up and they expect reality to sort of reorganize itself around this thing they've just made up and make it true. No, bitch, that's not how it works.
I saw a young boy today. He had a mask on and he was with his mother. And the look on his face, deep divers, he was so distressed, distraught, full of despair. He looked confused, bewildered, lost, frustrated, depressed. And I said, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is ridiculous. Deep divers.
Just moving on from the last little bit of that where I love that he just assumes that the reason the boy was sad was because of the mask. It could only be because of this mask. Like, literally anything else could have happened in this kid's day. Anything. But no, he looks distraught because of the mask, definitely. If we're to assume that a mask, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, that is anything to do with why this kid's upset, then it is a distinct possibility that the reason that this kid is upset is because he's seen Ralph Smart skateboarding down the road, and he mentions another clip that I haven't included in here that he's skateboarding. He's skateboarding down this road without wearing a mask. Right, that's more likely, I would say, than that the kid is so distraught for wearing the mask. And also, to be fair, if a kid's upset for wearing a mask, why just do it? Just like be upset for a little bit and then be fine afterwards. Like, come on. What we're overlooking here is that the kid might just be upset because Ralph Smart's staring at him. Like, can you imagine like Ralph Smart rolling down the road on a skateboard and just sort of staring at you as he's going? Like, I would be freaked out by that. Creepy stuff. Also, I don't know if you've ever tried to tell what someone's facial expression is underneath a mask. It's not that easy to do. You've got sort of eyebrows, eyes, and like the top part of your nose wrinkle to actually discern what a facial expression is. You haven't got much to go on. I honestly contest whether or not Ralph actually could tell what this kid's facial expression was under the mask. And could he tell the difference between disgust and being sad if the kid is expressing either of those emotions in that way, right? I don't believe it. I don't believe that Ralph Smart can tell, one, what this kid's facial expression is fully because he's wearing a mask, and two, why that kid is feeling that way just by rolling past him on a skateboard. I just don't think so. But then maybe he's got magic powers. Maybe he's like super extra sensory stuff like Teal has as well. I don't know. Does he claim that? I don't know. I mean, so maybe the kid was like slumping over or something and he looked a bit sad. But then even then, you can't say that that's because of the mask. Like, you don't know that. I just feel like Ralph's just picked this and woven it into his narrative to try and make a point, and people are going to hear it and go, oh yeah, no, that is bad. Blah, 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 blah.
As a psychologist who's done over 5,000 sessions.
Over 5,000. Now you need to say something that's not absolute horseshit. Can you do that? Sessions.
A lot of people do not even know the mental health issues that will arise from this whole lockdown, especially a lot of children, because a lot of children are being robbed of their childhood. Just me seeing the look on that young boy's face, I said, oh my gosh, what are we doing to our children?
So I think, like, to a point, I agree with Ralph here. I know he's going to weave it into something that I absolutely fundamentally disagree with in a second, but like, on the point of like, we don't really know what the mental health implications of the whole lockdown situation are going to be. We don't know how children are going to be affected by this, and it may be something that they do need to be helped through, you know, coming out afterwards and stuff. I agree with that. I do agree with him on that point. It is true that a lot of kids' childhoods are going to be affected by this. It might just be a year, it might be longer, but it's true that, children's lives have been affected by this, And that's regrettable, but also I feel like, in a way, it's like tough shit because, like, we got to survive this, right? Like, mental health is important, and of course it is, but these are unusual times, and we've got to just kind of do what we need to do to get through it, I feel like this whole mental health point on Ralph's part isn't the most honest point he's making here. I don't know that he's too worried about this. I feel like if he was really worried about the effects of things on people's mental health, then he possibly wouldn't be sitting here spewing paranoid conspiracy theories that don't have any real grounding in fact. But I don't know. It just doesn't strike me as being particularly genuine and honest at this point. It might be. I mean, presumably he doesn't know that what he's saying is nonsense. Presumably he does believe it. I don't know. That said, generally speaking, and setting aside a lot of the things that have changed a little bit because of the lockdown situation, generally speaking, things are better now than they've been, like, ever for a lot of us, quality of life wise, And okay, so maybe things have been getting incrementally worse for the last 4 years or so in certain countries, and rights have been eroded for certain demographics, but, generally speaking, and that's not to say we're done yet. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot of improvements to be made, and there's obviously a lot of people who are still struggling immensely. Right? But we're a little bit further along than we were. We're making improvements. Things are getting better. And in comparison to, like, several hundred years ago, there's definitely been progress. And it really is only 1 year right now with the virus. It could definitely go on for longer. Definitely could go on for longer. So, maybe put a mask on, Ralph. But, like, it just seems like he's arguing the toss a little bit here. And I think the sad reality is that, yeah, this has affected pretty much all of us, and some more than others. Some people have lost their lives, and that's a reality that we're facing here. You don't have to be a psychologist to realize that this is going to have some knock-on effects for mental health. But however much we lament that, our sadness doesn't warrant irrational behavior, And if you're angry at the situation, then I feel like, yeah, that's understandable. But it's still, to me, unjustified to make some claims about some invisible cabal sort of that you claim exists, when really you're only using allegory from Hollywood to support that, which is obviously deep state propaganda anyway. I mean, come on, Ralph, to back up your claims. Like, the disparity between the legitimacy of his claims and the reality of the effects of this virus, when you put them together, is so vast. It's just so... Do you know what I mean? It's infuriating. It makes me think of the Blitz, Like, the situation's not exactly the same, obviously, but it's comparable in a sense. Like, it's unprecedented. And the fact that it affects everybody in the areas that it's hitting, And also it changed lives and it ended lives, right? So in that sense, it's comparable. And at the time, if people had just made up stories about it, that wouldn't have helped keep people safe. Like, that wouldn't be contributing to safety for anybody. And it would have really more likely just put more people at risk, which again is comparable to what's happening now. And it seems especially silly because if you work together in times of hardship to overcome difficulties, then the chances of you actually surviving those difficulties, surviving that hardship, goes way the fuck up, right? It's just better for everybody if we can sort of agree on something and work together here, right? Like, even if you don't think that this thing's there, wear a mask, because you can't prove that this virus doesn't exist or whatever. You can't prove that, right? You can't verify that. Just wear a mask. Why does it matter? Why is it that much? Why? Again, similar with the Blitz, we didn't have a schema for that and how to deal with that then. And we don't really have a schema. We didn't really have a schema for this now on how to deal with it. And those that were better equipped among us at the time set about improving the situation and finding ways to cope. Others have set about misinforming those who don't know any better. Whether the intention is to deliberately spread nonsense or whether it's well-intentioned, I don't know. But I would imagine that at the time there were people. It's hard for me to imagine. Like, when you look back to, like, 1918 and the flu pandemic then as well, there were groups who were sort of anti-maskers then as well. It stands to reason that there would have been someone at some point in the Blitz who's just like, oh, actually, no, it's this thing that I've made up in my head, and trying to spread that misinformation. Again, I don't know whether that's well-intentioned or not, but like, yeah, there are definitely those similarities. The difference is, back then, entire cities were being decimated, right? And children were being sent away from their homes, from their families, who may not even ever see them again. Meanwhile, a fierce and incredibly drugged up racist army is flattening Europe, and they're being sent by a fascist dictator, and they're on their way, and they're hauling millions of innocent people away to literally be killed en masse, right? That is what was happening then. Today, things aren't great, right? Obviously, they're not great, and due to incompetent leadership, they are getting worse in some places. But for a lot of people, the worst case scenario right now is largely preventable. Realistically, it's largely preventable. Today, you're not being drafted, and you're not being sent away, and you're not being made to, live or work on a farm, or running terrified to a shelter in the middle of the night. You're asked to pop some fabric over your face, stay at home if you can, maybe pop Netflix on and watch a nice film or two and eat your favourite crisps. It's not that fucking hard. In that sense, it could be worse. And if you're complaining about this now, then I would have hated to be sitting next to you on the fucking train out of London during the evacuation. I'm sorry, but you would have been miserable company. Like, in an already miserable situation, getting stuck next to you on the train, leaving fucking London at that point. Fucking hell, that's misery on misery. The irony here is that Ralph is ramping up the fear in his message, and he's also dividing people with his baseless nonsense. And then he's saying choose fear, not love. Can you hear yourself, Ralph?
Will have to answer to your grandchildren when they say, okay, what were you doing in 2020 and beyond when they were locking down the whole planet? Well, I was just on my phone, not doing much when I could have done something. Stand for something right now. Otherwise, you will be in a prison for the rest of your life, because I told you, this was planned a long time ago. Everything is planned a long time ago.
Everything is planned a long time ago. Brilliant. Fantastic. Cheers for that, Ralph. Really interesting insight there. Of course it was fucking planned, right? Everything's fucking planned, isn't it? It was all planned a long time ago, and Ralph Smart knew all about it, even though he's only speaking explicitly about it right now for some reason. It's all planned. Everything is. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything's planned by some nefarious elite. Nothing happens by chance. Everything is perfectly explainable in life through these bizarre, paranoid ideas. You know what this reminds me of? And I'm sorry, but this is like a really super niche reference, but the Knights of the Nine DLC for the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, when the prophet is standing outside the Chapel of Anvil, and he's just screaming his lungs out about what he thinks the truth is.
Bitter knowledge to take to my grave.
And I think, if I remember rightly, the prophet is right about it, giving that positive affirmation to conspiracy theorists in the media that they're going to be right in the end. Fantastic. Whenever I hear stuff like this, it always makes me think that these people feel like deeply unsafe in the world. Like, this is the worldview of a maladjusted person. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is someone who needs everything to be explainable, otherwise they're going to spin out. And to an extent, I guess, like, fair enough. Like, if that's what you need, as long as you're not hurting anyone. But I really strongly object to sort of bowling onto fucking YouTube and just spouting this baseless nonsense and inflicting your terrible ideas on other people. And it really sounds like he's saying, don't wear a mask, don't stay in your house. Otherwise, the scary big bad cabal are just going to come along and lock you in your house forever. I'm going to have to ask for some sort of sound reasoning, some A to B on this, because I'm getting nothing here. It sounds like this is just sort of vaguely fear-mongering nonsense, which is playing into his audience's pre-existing, probably seeded by him, suspicion of a largely intangible, oppressive, hidden societal structure that's in some way worse than the verifiable examples of an intangible, oppressive, hidden societal structure that actually does fucking exist. One thing that bothers me is that these people who are like focusing on all of this inane nonsense could be doing some good if they pulled their heads and fingers out for long enough to actually look at some facts on this. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's fire here, there's passion here, there's these people who are like, this isn't good. And I feel like in a larger sense, a lot of this paranoid conspiracy theory thinking is the consequence of a system that hasn't earned the trust of its people, of governments that haven't earned the trust of its people, of media that haven't earned the trust of the people, and don't at this point really even deserve a lot of trust. And it's like that baseline of just this massive, I think it was Julian Field was talking about this on Twitter, this massive sort of inequity in society that people don't feel heard, people don't feel listened to, people don't feel like they matter. So that suspicion and the secrecy, the large amount of secrecy that goes on, that's present in a lot of these government circles as well, really just feeds this, and it in a way makes it inevitable, you know? And so there's like this level of systemic distrust that I feel is warranted in this day and age. There's a level of being in the know and pushing back against legit opposition that needs to happen, right? I feel like that's true. But while that's going on, Ralph Smart is faffing about in his garden, doling out mind sugar to his audience and distracting them and fucking like redirecting their passion and fire for something that could actually make a difference towards this fucking bullshit. We've got enough real problems in our society. Systemic racism, anti-feminist ideologies, paternalist worldviews held by people who see the average person as consuming machines, happiness machines that need to be controlled for the greater good. And you can look up Edward Bernays for that last one. These are genuine, legit things. In society now, we need to be targeting. We need to be looking at whether this sort of overtly capitalist worldview is working for everybody. We need to be looking at systemic racism and, as I say, feminist ideologies, paternalist worldview. All of these kinds of things need to be looked at. But for the time that conspiracy theorists have their heads up their asses thinking about all of this nonsense, they're not helping. They're not making the world a better place necessarily. They're just distracting themselves and chasing their own tails in a way. Just imagine if these conspiracy theorists turned their fire and their passion and their fury around on genuine, legit, actionable issues, rather than just talking about this sort of nonsense on the internet. Like, there's very little you can do that even in like a crossover point where actually they might be accidentally doing some good by acting out things that are associated with this thing. There's very little to be done when you're a conspiracy theorist on a forum on the internet or on YouTube or whatever, to make the world a better place. Honestly, I think the most these people do often is become extremists, and that's not a good thing. They hurt people then. So like, redirect this around, do some good without hurting people, obviously, and let's maybe work together on this rather than just... I think I've laboured that point too much now. Let's move on to the next clip.
Well, they want to turn you into RoboCop. I told you. This is part of the AI agenda. Elon Musk has come out with the Neuralink. They want to literally implant a chip inside of your brain because right now, human beings, they say, are very slow in downloading information. So they want to put a chip into your brain and turn you into a machine. That's what this is all about.
Right. RoboCop. Okay. I can understand the apprehension with the whole transhumanism thing, right? Especially in our current cultural and economic climate, right? I can understand how, like, given the fact that we're expected to just be like the hands for just an overall sort of corporate productivity machine, the idea of making people more productive would be appealing to certain individuals. And I can understand the suspicion about that and sort of this whole sort of microchipping people thing. I can understand suspicion about it, but I don't know that there's much evidence for that being like a compulsory thing. I don't see myself getting any brain chips anytime soon, not least of which because it's going to cost an arm and a leg. Also, I don't trust Elon Musk as far as I can throw him. It has to be said, it's quite a jump from like transhumanist technological advancements to they, mysterious and absent they, wanting to put chips in your head to make you RoboCop. Like, again, where are we getting this insistence on this sort of nefarious plot from? And also, I love how conspiracy theorists ignore like that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights exists. Like, they just sort of gloss over that. Don't worry about that. So much of Ralph Smart's content seems like he's just sitting, watching films, looking for how it fits into his sort of warped map of reality. And then he just makes a video about it. Like, he's just watching, I was watching RoboCop the other day. Weird film to be watching. And then, like, it's old now. And then, this would be a good video, and talk about this. And, like, since I started working on this video, he's released another video about Silence of the Lambs. Like, it's like he's literally just sitting there watching Hollywood films and going, oh, this is all part of the plan. Like...
What happens when they say, okay, you have to wear a hazmat suit? Many people will do it. What if they say, okay, you need to wear the RoboCop suit? Many people will do it.
Lovely slippery slope you've got there, Ralph.
And now they've turned you into a cyborg. Soon they're going to say, hey, you can't even touch anything. You have to be in this artificial suit, which is the AI suit, which is the ID 2020. You will be a cyborg, literally.
I just love this. This is my favorite kind of just wild nonsense. It's just the most bizarre, inside out nonsense. I love it. And also, as far as I know, ID 2020 does exist. You can look it up. It's not injections or anything. It's not a RoboCop suit. The only claims that they want to microchip people as part of a mandatory vaccination program are coming from conspiracy theorists like Ralph Smart. Like, that's it. It's linked to an understandable suspicion of our favourite good bad guy, Bill Gates, and a pilot study that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded in relation to a vaccination delivery device that could leave an invisible mark that your phone could detect on your skin, I believe. Nothing about injecting microchips into people. Nothing about making you RoboCop, Ralph. And while ID 2020 is interested in creating a database for undocumented individuals to help them keep track of their medical records and similar, they're not looking to inject anything into anybody either, and no claims have been made to that effect. Here's a quote from a Snopes article on this. Much of the credence lent to the false notion that Gates has designs to track you using vaccines comes from mixing the existence of that pilot study with another public health concept Gates is actively involved in researching called a digital identity. The basic premise behind a digital or decentralized identity in the context of Gates' work is simple. It would involve some sort of cloud-based storage of medical and/or personal identification documents accessible only with the consent of the owner, but available anywhere in the world. Crucially, such a concept, whose central scientific challenges are in the realm of encryption and blockchains, has nothing to do with anything injected into the body. Despite this, conspiracy theorists falsely use Gates' support for digital identity initiatives as evidence of his intentions to build a vaccine-enabled surveillance state. I would have my own reservations about that, and I always worry about these people who find it within themselves to position themselves as the one who should do shit like this, right? But again, yeah, no one's making claims that any of these chips are going to be injected into anybody other than conspiracy theorists, so...
They have made other people an enemy to you. That's the whole plan. It's called divide and conquer. United we stand and divided we fall. So don't see another human being as a threat. See them as your brother and your sister, because it's only unity that's going to turn this whole thing round.
Somehow I feel like the irony of this is lost on Ralph here. It's exactly baseless paranoiac nonsense like this that's dividing people on the virus situation. Without people like Ralph sitting here saying shit like this, we would be more united, we would be less divided. If we could get an inkling of common sense from conspiracy theory people on this, then I think we would be one step closer to having this situation solved, realistically. And of course, they're not the only ones causing the problem. It's the economists and the big business people who right now want to get the economy back on track. And in some countries, it's the literal president. But, you know, the conspiracy theorists coming, you know, in line and sort of joining everybody in reality would help, wouldn't it? So, wow, that was quite a trip. We went from, QAnon dog whistles all the way to big pharma hate, to anti-vaxx theories and rhetoric, to anti-masker rhetoric, to the AI agenda and fucking RoboCop. So the real question is Ralph Smart fully pilled on QAnon as well as all this other stuff? It may be that his version of all these sort of obviously inside-out narratives is sort of adjacent to, or it's like a crossover with the QAnon stuff. Or, like I mentioned earlier, it might be the case that he's just sort of dog-whistling to sort of bring those people in, to invite them into his audience and make them feel like he's, you know, on their wavelength, to appeal to that larger crowd, or that, you know, tap that dem, right? And doesn't actually believe in it fully himself, or maybe he's like one foot in, one foot out. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below what you think. I always feel like we can count on Ralph himself smart for his own brand of like wacky fear-mongering cloaked in this sort of preachers hype you up rhetoric, you know? Personally, I would be gutted if he'd bought into this sort of boomer American wet dream thing. If you made it this far in the video, by the way, comment lasagna down below, because I've heard the QAnon lot are really in a twist about Italian food at the moment, so maybe. Also, I want to say a massive thank you to Navadia. I couldn't have done this video without Navadia. Thank you for your help with this. And if you want to check out Navadia's channel, there's a link to her channel in the description below. I'm Andy Fellows and I'm here pretty much every Thursday. Please be kind and ask good questions, and I'll see you in the next one. No, bitch. It's gonna click. Why can't I click? No, bitch.